Yeah, time for another DraftScience video presentation. Anyway, so I'll do a little more kinetic energy. Thought I would just mention I don't like Thunderfoot much, but he did do a couple of videos on Apollo 13 and his analysis of what caused the oxygen tank to explode. And anyway, so yes, it was very educational. So it has some value. Lots of things I didn't know about oxygen tanks and even oxygen in general. In terms of, unless there's a fuel, oxygen really doesn't just explode. And so you have to have something for it to oxidize. And if there aren't any oxidants, it's not like a regular explosion. So the whole idea is that there was a hole in the tank, where they put the electrical wires in to heat it, which seems kind of, wow, I didn't know they heated oxygen. But yeah, the whole point is you got to turn it into something that you can breathe. Yeah, but you can't breathe the liquid. But anyway, so just a hole in the tank, about that size, and it outgassed quickly. It didn't explode. It just outgassed quickly, which caused probably the skin to explode, and that probably took some crap with it. Little pipes and shit that were connecting the different tanks, and that's probably why the other tank was leaking, blah, 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 blah. So, interesting anyway. That kind of stuff is always, it's like the whole space shuttle blow up thingies. It's always interesting, the little tiny details. But it's detective work, and some of it you have to leave ambiguous, like what really happened. I mean, what caused the short in the first place? That caused the wires to get to burn their insulation and blah 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 blah. But anyway, so just pointing out. I won't link to it because like Thunderfoot's an asshole. I have offered him the $2,000 to debunk me. Yeah, to debunk this regular physics, this real simple physics that's so obviously wrong. All right, so this is going back all the way to the physics girl example and the nonsensical, mushy, silly rhetoric that she provided as an explanation. So you take something that weighs, say, 5 tons, you bang it into something else that weighs 5 tons, okay, same weight, so now you've doubled the mass to 10 tons here. And so if you had a 10 mile an hour here, you get, with the total, when you connect the trains, and if you do it efficiently, okay, you're going to get 5 miles per hour here. And so you've conserved the momentum. So if you do the math, that's a little bit shy of being visible, isn't it? Yes, it is. Alright, so if you do the math, you end up with the same momentum here. So if you had 100, you end up with 100 here, pretty much. Okay, it's going to be like 98. So in a sense, the momentum is easily conserved, and yet, by their theory, this magical stuff called kinetic energy, you lost 1/2 of it. Just, it's gone. Half the energy disappeared somewhere. And this physics girl uses excuses like deformation, like somehow this thing got all bent up, or sound, or heat, like a bunch of heat was created. And that accounts for half the energy. Now you can understand with real 10-ton trains, this would be an insane amount of energy. The 10 miles an hour, 5 tons, to lose half of that energy would be a lot of energy. But even with these little things, you can sort of understand it would be a lot of energy. You would see some evidence of this tremendous amount of energy you're losing. And there is no evidence of it. It's invisible, and it doesn't make any practical sense to say you conserve the the momentum, and yet you lost something, you did something to the world. Because if you don't use your momentum, you can't do something to the world. I can't run into a brick wall, okay, and well, let's like I can't crash through a brick wall, all right, without coming out the other side slower than I went in. Okay, I mean, I have to use my momentum. I have to use my velocity, or I have to leave something behind, as the space people would say. I can't do it for free. There's no free energy. So where did all this deformation happen? Where did all this sound, where did all this stuff come out of? It didn't come out of my momentum. What did it come out of? So I'm just saying, logically, I shouldn't even have to make this argument. It is so fundamentally wrong. Now the fact, okay, so the dissection of this insipid circumstance, this circumstance that can't make any sense to anybody, anybody reasonable, logical. The facts indicate every good reason to understand. It's like you actually had something to burn inside the oxygen tank. This is a big, huge giveaway. Like there was just, some charcoal briquettes, that you had inside the tank. Something that's, a fuel for the oxygen to oxidize. It's so obvious. And the obvious thing here was the conflict between Newton and Leibniz. Newton's physics is MV, okay, and it's not anything else. He never believed in anything else. That's Newton, MV. And so they lie to you, and tell you this is some sort of, they'll say classical, or they'll use some word to indicate that somehow Newton's math or Newton's perspective allowed for this squaring stuff. No. Leibniz, Newton's worst enemy in life. So let's understand, it's Newton's worst enemy that came up with this MV squared thing. And then 100 years later, they put the half in front of it. So here you have lots of facts indicating this is garbage. The only thing that defended it in the 1700s, after Newton's death and Leibniz's death, was some silly clay experiments. And Newton was actually still alive, I think. But anyway, clay experiments, that's it. Nothing really good. I mean, you're using clay to decide how much energy something has. Who's thought of that? Who thought that clay is a really good way to measure energy? How far something penetrates through clay. And the obvious argument is that clay could have a huge bias for things with a high velocity and a bias against things with a low velocity. So these facts, this is just a glaring reason, okay, for, this being garbage physics, is that its origin is garbage. Okay, Leibniz was a religious kook, didn't like atheism in physics, wanted physics to have more gods in it. I mean, it's just a terrible origin. And so there's every good reason to say it's a nonsense. This never happened. Okay, this nonsense never happened. This is all there is. This is energy, mv. Your mass times your velocity. That's all you got. That's what's conserved in the experiment. And there's no deformation, and there's no heat. I mean, there's a little bit of friction, and you'll see that in the results. So you lose a little bit of the momentum. Just a little tiny bit, and that's it. And you can make it smaller and smaller depending on how you introduce, how you combine the two moving objects, the one stationary object and the moving object, to double the mass. Depending on how you double the mass, you can do it very gracefully. You could have like a water tank, and you could just pour water in as the train's moving. Just pour water in. Lots of ways you can introduce the extra mass, okay, gently, and you'll get the same results. You'll conserve your momentum, and you'll still lose half your kinetic energy. Because the kinetic energy formula is just a mathematical nonsense. It doesn't have any real-world sensible reason. There's no reason to think velocity squares. There's no even understanding of how you could even square a velocity in any circumstance that would make any sense. It's the kind of thing you don't sit there and say, well, we have a volume and we're going to square the volume. There's no reason to look at a velocity as something you would square. There's no circumstance where it goes, it's going 25 miles an hour, and all of a sudden we're going to make that 100 miles an hour, or something like that. That's what squaring would do. Anyway, no reason. So it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know why you people are so belligerent in resisting the obvious factual trail that every indication is there's no reason to believe in kinetic energy. There's no experimental evidence for it. They haven't done the, a car takes 4 times as much gas to go 60 miles an hour as it takes to go 30 miles an hour. There's no evidence it takes more fuel proportionally. I mean, obviously it takes more, twice as much more. Likewise with stopping something, if you stop it proportional to its mass, that is, use a braking force that's as big as the braking force you used on a lighter object, it'll stop the same rate because you're taking more, obviously, energy out of it. So it'll only go twice as far, kind of arguments. The 60 mile an hour car only goes twice as far as the 30 mile an hour car if you proportionally brake it. So anyway, yeah, there's every bit of reason not to believe in this nonsense, and it's just a free energy formula. It just makes all kinds of messes. So here's the simple experiment. You just crash the one car into the other car, doubling its mass, and they stick together because there's Velcro on there.
And let's see what the photo gates read. This one is 0.158 seconds.
So 158, you realize that that's now with the double the mass, and that's longer the time, the slower it is. So the bigger the seconds, the slower it is. So 158 is almost 160.
And this one is 0.077 seconds.
And that's almost 80. So yeah, it's almost exactly half. So it's pretty close. So this would be 148 to 150. What was it again? Well, anyway, so it's whatever, 1% off. So you lost a little bit to friction. So it left a little bit slower than half the speed. And yet we're supposed to believe that half the energy of that moving car, half of the energy it has, was somehow went into the environment, because as Feynman would say, you can't destroy energy, so it has to be somewhere. So Feynman uses a little kid hiding blocks. So he has a bunch of ABC blocks in the house, and there's a certain number of blocks, but he can hide them in places. So you can go into the room and try to find them, and he's hid them places. And so he uses this as a metaphor that your energy goes into heat, and your energy goes into moving the atmosphere. Your energy goes somewhere, but it's always in the room. Okay, it's always in the environment, and you should be able to find it. You won't find half the energy here. You're not going to find the heat. You're not going to find the sound. You're not going to find the vibrations. You're not going to find the deformation. You're not going to see any, ping pong ball flying into a tomato and exploding it kind of thing. None of that happened. And it's just really bad physics for them to use this notion that somehow they conserved this thing called kinetic energy, because they didn't. Because it never existed in the first place. And momentum is the thing you're conserving. Momentum is the energy. Momentum is the thing you'll always find in the environment somewhere. If you have heat, it came out of something's momentum if you increase the heat. Obviously, the heat's already there. You don't need to use momentum to put it there. But if you're going to increase the temperature, you got to take it out of something's movement. Likewise, all the rest of it. I mean, any deformation, any misshapping, any of this stuff. It's all got to come out of it somewhere. Vibrational energy is always the tricky one, because it's obviously you can't show up later and see that something vibrated. So you have to kind of be aware of that one at the time, and be conscious of the fact that movement did absorb some energy. But it really depends on how it moves, right? Because some movement will be free if you're just giving it back. Well, let's not go into that. But anyway, so there's no reason to believe it, because none of the facts don't indicate that there was half the energy was lost, that it's in the environment somewhere. There's no indication that the environment gained whatever half. Like I said, if the kinetic energy was 150, that there's somehow 50 bits of kinetic energy in the environment after those two trains, those two cars combined. And there's no evidence of it. And so why do you persist? I haven't heard a single rational counter argument about how this could work, except for people throwing formulas around. So they show you how they do their derivatives, but their derivatives don't mean anything. They're not related to actual reality. I mean, they're just, they're just playing a numbers game. The numbers game isn't going to explain where the energy went. It's not going to show you where the heat is, or where the sound is, or where the whatever that we create that used up the momentum. They're not going to show you how it was used. Well, it's not using the momentum. It's obviously using the magical kinetic energy, whatever the hell that is. But just understand, no matter how I do this experiment, no matter how gracefully I introduce the extra mass, the argument, it always comes out the same. I always lose half. I don't lose a quarter. Somehow I can't avoid losing half the energy. It's impossible not to lose at least half. And a little bit more. Like I said, a little bit more is just from friction. That's real momentum losses. So you don't really, physics will say, oh, we transferred 100% of the momentum. No, you didn't really. It's only 98%. Okay. But the fact is you lost half the energy. But there's no evidence you lost half the energy. There's nothing in the environment that says you lost half the energy. So why do people believe it? It's got a terrible history. And there's really no physical evidence. All the physical evidence points to it's a nonsense. There's no such thing. It doesn't show up anywhere in here. Momentum's conserved fundamentally, practically, just about. And there's just no evidence that 50% of anything was lost anywhere. So, I'd like the trolls to answer the question. What's your rational explanation? Where did the energy go? 50% of whatever you call energy is now in the environment. Show me where it is. Tell me where it is. Explain where it is. And understand it's a lot of energy to account for. I mean, it's real joules of energy. And you have to explain where the hell it is. So anyway, he does the same experiment with different weight carts, and it really doesn't tell you anything, but it's the same rule applies. The momentum is always conserved. Okay, and the kinetic energy comes out all kinds of funky numbers. So, I'm just saying, what's the counter argument? How do you explain this magical concept of kinetic energy? Of 1/2 mv squared, because there's just no evidence that that's real energy. There's no experiment showing that it's real energy, that it has anything to do with reality. Yeah, well, I've been here and done this, but until there's a counter argument, obviously all these insults and bullshit seem really, I don't even know what the right word would be, so insincere and fallacious to keep saying it. Look at these brilliant comments. Oh, God, the internet is just such a crappy place. Okay, you appear to be more confused than the students who are confusing more. UWU. I mean, this is a college video. It's just not even close to a reasonable comment here. Look at virtual laboratory 3D real-time WebGL about momentum conservation, absolutely elastic collisions in particular, in mechanics. So this was put up by VE Labs. Who the hell is that? Anyway. Seems like they're just promoting their crap. Let's click on it just for curiosity. Yes, leave YouTube. Oh, isn't this, this is just too exciting. Yeah, okay, forget it. Ugh. So these are virtual experiments not done in the real world. How fascinating. Shit. Alright, anyway. Yeah, it's great. A virtual laboratory, and, don't bother with the real experiments. Let's just fake it. Anyway. Forget that. Alright, sorry. Disappointing comment section there, obviously. 10,000 videos and 10,000 views and only 5 comments and only 55 thumbs up. There's something way wrong, okay, with that. But it's a perfectly good demonstration video. It's just kind of funny that these you know, they're just simple demonstrations. I mean, it's just amazing that the view numbers are this crappy and obviously mostly fake. God, it's just so depressing. Alright, anyway. Fuck. We are so fucked. There's just not enough smart people on this planet. Yuck. Alright, so till the next time. Yeah, there really just aren't enough smart people on the planet. There just aren't enough people capable of doing this logic, reasoning, fact thing. Yuck. Oh, I should do this. This has been a DraftScience video presentation. I'm very depressed now, so it's just I have no enthusiasm.